and how to extend the quality of life for your cherished companions. As a community advocate, I will also discuss important social issues that affect our city. I plan to showcase organizations and heroes who are doing amazing things to help others. Remember to tune in every Tuesday morning at 10, starting soon.
This is Barbara Barrigan-Parrilla with Delta Flows, a radio show by the Voice of Stockton and Restore the Delta. This is the weekly radio show where we discuss everything Delta related: the environment, water management, water quality, farming, history and culture, public events, recreation, Delta food, and the arts. Tune into Delta Flows on KXVS, the Voice of Stockton, streaming live on Facebook and YouTube at KXVS Radio.
KXVS LP Stockton.
This program does not reflect the views of KXVS management or KXVS, the Voice of Stockton.
KXVS, the Voice of Stockton. It's time for Delta Flows with your host, Barbara Barrigan-Parrilla.
Thank you, Don. Welcome to Delta Flows. This is the show that's about everything about the San Francisco Bay Delta Estuary. And today we're going to do things a little different. We had looked forward to having friends on from the Locke Historical Society, and that show had to be rescheduled for January. So today, Governor Dunn is going to talk with me about what's happening with Restore the Delta and to give the community at large updates on government processes and our activities coming up for 2018.
All right. Well, Barbara, welcome to your own show.
Thank you.
So first, before we go into that, I wanted to talk about the event. It was a holiday fundraiser at the Mile Wine Company.
Yes.
And we had dignitaries. Bob Elliott was there. Miguel Villapudua, the county supervisors. We had representative from Kathleen Galgiani's office. And representatives. We had some city representatives there as well.
We had representatives from Mayor Tubbs' office. Mm-hmm. We had representatives from our Assembly member Susan Eggman's office as well. And we had other people who were involved, dignitaries that were involved, politicos in the background and in the planning and in support. But as we learned with a holiday fundraiser, we had a lot of people who bought tickets and not so many who came.
Yes.
And we now know in the future we better do it in the first week of December.
Yeah.
It's a little easier.
Then again, buying a ticket and not showing up still helps to support the cause.
It still completely helped the cause.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like it was an empty place either. So we were, I would say, about 90% full.
Yeah.
And our fundraisers, are really known throughout the Delta community for being fun events. They support us. They support our cause. And we really are an organization that is driven by community support, much like KXVS.
Yeah.
But we try to make it fun in the process, because so much of what goes into a fundraiser, whether it's local talent or art, we had a lot of Delta art at the event. Whether it's the food or the wine that's served, it's kind of the bounty of this region.
Yeah. It was actually a very, very nice event. We did a little bit of coverage in there, and we talked with Bob Elliott and his vocal support of Restore the Delta and what you're doing to stop the twin tunnels from being built. We also noticed that there were some award recipients, and Tim and Espy specifically, who have done a lot for the organization, which is volunteer supported, but also funded from some important groups. Tell us a little bit about why they were selected for that.
Well, we give Delta Advocate Awards, and over the years, we've given Delta Advocate Awards from, famous economists like Jeff Michael, to elected officials, to lawyers within the region. But we really wanted to recognize the work of Tim Stroshane and Esperanza Vielma because they both, as Restore the Delta employees, went above and beyond the call of duty this last year. Tim's award, while we acknowledged it, we're going to physically give it to him later on in the spring. He had some family business to take care of this week.
Yes.
So the event really focused on honoring Esperanza, Espy. Vielma for all of her work. She runs another organization in town, Cafe Coop.
Yes, shout out to Cafe Coop.
Another nonprofit that's done a lot of valuable work helping young entrepreneurs establish their businesses here in Stockton and San Joaquin County. And Esperanza really made a sacrifice because she took on working for us in a long-term kind of full-time, intense, temporary position and really had to let a lot of things go with Cafe Coop. She put on 20,000 miles traveling between here and Los Angeles and then putting on hundreds of miles every week within Los Angeles, working with elected officials, groups that could influence elected officials to really try to get the word out throughout Southern California that Cal Water Fix, which of course is misnamed, we call it No Fix, the Delta Tunnels project, is really a bad deal for ratepayers and environmental justice communities in Southern California.
Right.
And, she succeeded way, beyond our dreams in helping with that organizing effort in Southern California. We didn't win the vote, but you have to look at who we are up against with Metropolitan Water District. That is an agency with a multi-billion-dollar budget every year, and that has $5 billion in reserve. And Restore the Delta is a small organization. We max out. This was our big year. We maxed out with 5 employees.
Right.
It's not
David and
exactly
Goliath,
the same. Yes.
Now, that's interesting. First of all, it's interesting that they have a $5 billion reserve and it's a water district.
Yes.
Yes, go figure. But it just in describing that situation, that is quite a significant change, and it was very important because there was a bit of a disconnect earlier, like last year, 2016 even, where Northern California and Southern California would seem to be in two different conversations, and I think that this is a significant turning point. Getting everybody kind of on the same page.
There's this strain in California, I want to say, when people don't read deeply, particularly in Northern California, that only sees the people of Southern California as all Beverly Hills residents, kind of swimming pools and movie stars, if you will.
Right.
Okay. And the truth is that Southern California has many of the same experiences, problems, and challenges for a significant part of its population as we do in Stockton. And there's a difference between the way moneyed interests in Southern California operate water and resources and what happens to those communities. And the truth is, everyday people make up the bulk of the population.
Right.
Water management through Metropolitan Water District really exacerbates inequalities within that region. And our critique of Cal Water Fix, when we came to it 11 years ago, it was really an environmental critique. And, of course, that remains first and foremost.
Right.
How do you protect an estuary by taking more water out of it?
Interesting, yes.
But there's a real problem with the entire project and with how we see now water districts that take Delta Water operate in California. It's a real problem with equity.
Okay.
The people who get the water don't share equally in that resource with people within their own communities.
Right. And then there's also the disparity between the different uses of water: agriculture, industry, drinking water. And anytime that we're dealing with water issues, the public is always kind of given this information like, it's about water in your lawn, which is, of course that's an issue. But when we talk about total water usage, it's quite the total residential water usage is like 7% of all the water we got.
Well, in California, of the developed water, that's water that's used for beneficial uses other than the environment. Right. 80% of it goes to agriculture.
Right.
And 20% goes for urban use, municipal industrial use in urban communities. Of that 20% that goes to your urban areas, about half is used for outdoor landscaping.
Right.
So there are ways to really increase efficiencies in urban water use,
right,
so that you can free up water for agriculture and protect your environment. However, it's not sustainable to overdevelop agriculture when you have a limited water resource.
Right.
So where we get pushback, or you'll get critique, is here in the San Joaquin Valley, our economy is really based on agriculture. Of course, the Delta is separate in that, and the way the water wars, so to speak, kind of divide us from the rest of the San Joaquin Valley, particularly the west side, the agricultural lands down the I-5.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, so much of that food that is grown in that strip of farmland, it only contributes 0.3% to our state's GDP.
Wow.
And the majority of their crops are sold for export, particularly the nut crops like almonds, to China and India and Japan. So it's not really feeding the nation.
Right.
It's not feeding Californians. And in some ways, it's almost like filling up water tankers and putting them across the ocean to other countries.
Yeah, it sounds like that. And, when I was traveling down I-5, I saw all these signs like, is growing food wasting water? And, what a leading question, right?
Right.
Yeah, growing food for us to not eat is...
Well, and even if there is a security interest in feeding other parts of the world, and, we do have the climate and the soil where it's great to share in our bounty. You don't want people starving throughout the world.
Of course.
High-end almonds are not always that basic food group.
Right.
It's not vegetables. It's not rice. It's not a sustainable level of protein.
Exactly.
That really can feed hungry people throughout the world. It's really a commodity crop.
Yeah. A luxury crop.
It's a luxury crop that makes people very rich.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, there are so many, and part of the issue, I think, and the reason why it takes such a monumental effort is because there's so many different agencies and organizations and departments involved across regions, all across the state, and some interests out of state, of course. And so these different entities we learn about, and we want to kind of figure out what is their role in this water situation. I don't want to call it a fix either, because it sounds like the fix, like slang for a fix. The fix is in, right? But there's the water board, the Delta Stewardship Council.
Yes.
So describe these entities and tell us how they're involved.
Well, this is what happens with water that's taken from the Delta, and how water is managed throughout the state. You have two projects presently that take water from the Delta. That's the Central Valley Project.
Right.
And when you drive down I-5, you see the two canals. They take the water from the pumps in Tracy. And there's the State Water Project. The State Water Project includes water districts like Metropolitan Water District of Southern California.
Right.
They were the second canal, or the second delivery system that was brought on. That includes the Kern County Water Agency, where Stuart Resnick farms from.
Okay.
And it includes part of the water delivery to Santa Clara Valley Water District in the Silicon Valley.
All right.
Then on the other side, you have the Central Valley Project. It's the other canal, and it delivers the bulk of the water to those agricultural groups like the Westlands Water District, which is the biggest irrigation district in the United States.
Interesting.
On the west side of the I-5.
Yes.
And then they share some water also with Santa Clara Valley Water District in Silicon Valley. Santa Clara Valley is unique in that it pulls water from both systems.
Right.
So even though they're public agencies, they serve very specific interests. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, because they end up serving the connected, the powerful, the people who have moneyed interest in their respective areas or communities. Okay,
Right.
but then you have your state agencies that have a role to play in oversight and management of water system
Okay.
and to protect water as a public interest resource for all of California. And that's the State Water Resources Control Board, which implements federal and state EPA laws, clean water laws. They are responsible for making sure that water quality standards are met through the state through a whole host of laws, both federal and state laws. Underneath them, they have regional water boards that delve down and work more deeply on watershed issues within a geographical area.
Okay.
Then you have the Department of Water Resources, which is the state agency that oversees state dams for the water exporters and the State Water Project. Then you also have to interface with the Bureau of Reclamation that oversees that federal Central Valley Project system and their related dams.
Wow.
Okay.
Now we have yet
We haven't even gotten to the Delta Stewardship Council.
and then we haven't had any overlap yet in what you're talking about. These are separate groups who manage. Slight overlap, but managing specific systems.
Here's where it gets really complicated, and this is a big part of our critique of the California Department of Water Resources and the Federal Bureau of Reclamation. They are, the State Water Board and the EPA perhaps are really the regulators, but the Department of Water Resources and the Bureau are government entities that are supposed to manage the existing systems to deliver water while protecting the public interest and making sure that systems work in all ways and all capacities for water users in California. That means, like in the case of DWR, we want to get water through our system through those projects to Southern California.
Right.
But we're also responsible for overseeing that dams like Orville are maintained properly.
Oh.
And that there aren't cracks in the spillways.
Yes.
And that we're going to make sure that those contractors pay their money in and that they do the work that they're supposed to. And so much of our problem in California is that these water districts that take water have captured. They're holding the regulators captive. And that's because there's a revolving door between upper management between these entities in terms of who works for whom.
Right.
There are then sometimes between the Department of Water Resources and the Bureau of Reclamation, we see that they have a very strong influence per the direction of the governor over how things lean sometimes with the State Water Resources Control Board. The State Water, we're in hearings with them right now, and I would say probably out of all groups that we work with, all government groups, highest level of decorum, more adherence to rule of law, and much more fairness. But there are questions sometimes about where their responsibilities end as the regulators and where do responsibilities begin with DWR, and sometimes those lines get a little bit blurred.
Okay.
So you have fishing groups, environmental groups, good governance groups that keep their eyes on that situation.
Now, I saw a Facebook post about comments, and it was like, should you comment even if it's a meeting for supporters or a gathering for proponents? Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, Restore the Delta in all these years of advocacy, we've been at it for 11 years. I'm surprised our base has stayed with us as well as they have because we have done so many protests. We have turned people out to advocate at government agency meetings time and time again.
Right.
And most of the time, we still think that that's a worthy endeavor because you see pushback, you see changes in attitudes, you see that issues have to be covered.
Right.
But this last year, we kind of feel like we've hit the wall with the Delta Stewardship Council. And let me describe who that is. The Delta Stewardship Council was created with the Delta Reform Act in 2009, and they were given the task of implementing under Water Code what is called the co-equal goals.
Yes.
The co-equal goals,
which are awesome.
They really are. And you know, we were, and I'll explain this in a moment. We weren't in favor of the legislation when it was written.
Right.
And not because the legislation is bad. It's actually a thing of beauty, because it's saying that equal to exporting water is protecting and enhancing and restoring the Delta for future generations.
Right.
We have many good laws on the books in California. Where things fall down time and time again is in the enforcement. So when the Delta Stewardship Council was created, or when the Delta Reform Act was up, we had fought against it, not out of fear so much of what that law was about, and we've even grown to love it more over the years.
Right.
But knowing that the council that they would create was going to be stacked with political appointments that would truly not implement the law.
Right.
So, under the law, they had to create a Delta plan for restoring the Delta, and the law gives them charge to incorporate into that plan whatever the decisions were out of the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, now Cal Water Fix.
Right.
The problem is that the conservation part of that project has been stripped away.
Right.
We now only have a water conveyance project. We won our first lawsuit against the Delta Stewardship Council based on not really looking at and developing flow criteria for the Delta in that plan, and looking at how much water should be passed through the Delta, how the system should really be managed if you're going to incorporate new conveyance.
Right. Which would be the first step, even before discussing it or sharing, even if with the public. And
that's a big problem. I'll explain. That's a big problem in other arenas as well.
Right.
So that case is now in appeal. The state appealed the initial ruling. And now, because the BDCP no longer stands, the Delta Stewardship Council had to go back and make amendments to their plan that now would very easily incorporate Cal Water Fix without asking the right questions. So they have to legally go through scoping meetings on the subject. So last spring and summer, we worked with other groups that work in the Delta, and all together as a coalition, we turned out hundreds of people to make public comments and written comments.
Right.
We had meetings in Sacramento. There was one in Discovery Bay, not Discovery, Brentwood.
Brentwood, yes.
Hundreds of people turned out.
Yes.
And yet what we advocated for has not really shown up in the revised draft. And one of the things that really disturbed Restore the Delta was we made it clear to them that not only should meetings be moved more towards evenings, but that the Delta Stewardship Council was not doing adequate outreach into environmental justice communities or to Delta communities through media.
Yeah.
You only know about these meetings if you happen to sign up for their list.
Yeah, so or follow Restore the Delta.
Okay, so you just said the important thing, or follow Restore the Delta.
Right.
So what does the Delta Stewardship Council count on? The Delta Stewardship Council counts on Restore the Delta turning out people to their meetings so they could check off the box that the meeting was well attended, but yet they continue with their pro-conveyance agenda, and there's no meeting of the minds. There's no listening to what people need and expect from this region for protections.
Right.
So we went through the scoping process. Now we're in the formal comment period for this change, the environmental impact report to that Delta plan. And we kind of decided, when we came back from Los Angeles, they were holding one of the formal comment meetings here in Stockton. We sent out notice, and I think all 24 people that showed up because of our notice.
Wow.
We didn't see any community outreach. And then I was talking with local media folks who told me, never heard from the Delta Stewardship Council until the morning of this meeting.
Right.
So it seemed to me that not only did they not listen to us about the plan, but they really drilled down and clung to their, we're going to give as little notice as possible.
Right.
So we kind of decided to restore the Delta. We want people to put in comments, and we're going to put more information up next week about how to file a formal comment.
Right.
You have to do it so you have standing for future litigation.
Right.
Anticipating that they won't do the right thing. They won't make changes to these amendments as we want to look at things like flows, water availability, and impacts to Delta communities if those tunnels are built. But we kind of decided our followers do so much community work. They show up time and time again that it's not worth showing up because they don't listen.
Right.
Let's do what we have to fill legal requirements just like they do. But we're kind of done helping them check their boxes off.
Check their boxes.
Yes.
This is Delta Flows. This is Governor Dunn, a guest interviewer, talking with Barbara Barrigan-Parrilla, the show host. I know that the show is supposed to be only a half hour. If you have a little bit more time, I wanted to talk about what we're talking about here, which is upcoming and what needs to be done. There are some significant events and actions for 2018. So let's move into that.
Okay, so just to wrap up, as we were talking about the Delta Stewardship Council comments, one of the major actions for 2018 is to follow our website. We'll have more information up next week. Follow our social media, and please get your written comments in about those Delta Plan amendments to the Stewardship Council by the January 22nd deadline.
And you do a great job of that. You've been doing a great job of that. In fact, that is where I learned how to to submit comments, is to restore the Delta's advocacy. What's the next event or community action that we need to be aware of?
You know, Restore the Delta staff will be busy monitoring the State Water Resources Control Board hearings. We're going into the second part where they will be considering granting a change in where they divert the water from to give that permit to build the tunnels.
Okay.
People should always tune in if they're interested, but we'll keep people updated on that. They're long hearings. They're filled with lots of legal processes, so sometimes it makes eyes glaze over maybe for the average follower. So I think if you keep track of us, we'll tell you when you should really be paying attention to that. I think what's really important that our followers can do and really take the lead to help us is we have gubernatorial races coming up this year in 2018.
2018, big deal for California.
It is a big deal for California, and it's a big deal for the Delta.
Yes.
Governor Brown, while every governor in California for 30 years has always favored this project in some form or another because the interests, the water interests, are very powerful politically.
Right.
No one has gone after this project with greater enthusiasm or zeal or determination than Governor Brown.
Right.
We want to make sure that the next governor recognizes that this project is not only not going to restore the Delta, but that it is a real boondoggle for ratepayers and taxpayers in California when it starts at $17 billion and doesn't make any additional water.
Right.
So we're a 501c3. We cannot endorse a candidate. Okay. We don't want to endorse a candidate because within our ranks, we have people from every political background, and everyone backs who they like for whatever reason or for different reasons, and we're respectful of that.
Sure.
Okay? But regardless of who you support, we are urging our followers to hold their favorite candidate accountable.
Yes.
And that means going to their fundraisers, contacting them, going to their town halls, going to their events, and really pushing them for a commitment to oppose the Delta tunnels and to let them know why you oppose the Delta tunnels because of the environmental impacts and the costs.
Right.
If people can do that, we could really push for a slate of gubernatorial candidates who recognize that Californians overall really do not like this project.
Yes, definitely. And then we have a pool of candidates who have, their varying positions, but we can at least get some consensus on this subject that we all agree on.
That's right. Yeah. And what we can do legally, and we will do in the weeks ahead, is we will let you know. We've put some of this up before. The press has tracked it, where different candidates stand on the tunnels. That's not an endorsement. That's stating the fact. That's stating their position.
Public information.
And we're happy to share that with people. But we really think that people showing up for their events, of course, always being respectful, always being polite, but being firm in their convictions that they'd rather see $17 billion invested in fixing Delta levees, rebuilding our existing pumping system for the Delta, and getting exported water down to sustainable levels to protect the estuary, making investments in regional self-sufficiency throughout California, that's a much better way to spend public money on water.
And that's what the Stewardship Council was even implemented for. Regional self-sufficiency, protecting our environment, those great causes that we agreed on when they were in 2009.
No, that's a big part of it. They're supposed to be making sure that there's reduced reliance on the Delta. They're supposed to be making sure that there are proper flows through the Delta.
Right.
And even if there would never be a complete meeting of the mind with them on conveyance, they have not done things in the proper order.
Right. Now, 2018 is also going to have some litigation. We have to, this has been something that's been ongoing. We
have an ongoing case, as do many other groups, over the California Environmental Quality Act, the approval of Cal Water Fix. Under that law here within the state, we also have litigation going on, as was described last week by Tom Keeling, about the validation of bonds through DWR. So litigation is another strategy. Going back to the State Water Resources Control Board, in addition to all the hearings, we're going to have determination on flow criteria for the San Joaquin River as it flows into the Delta. And then we're going to have a release of a water quality plan update for the Sacramento River portion. Now, what was really backwards under the Brown administration is that they moved forward with the permitting for the tunnels without updating these water quality plan updates first. And again,
decades old.
You're right. It's over 20 years old, and those are important processes that we can ask people to show up for meetings and to submit comments. Rivers can't live if you divert more than half of their water from them.
Yeah, that's nonsensical.
Right.
Yes. Now, this is 2018 we're talking about, but Restore the Delta does have long-term goals. I mean, obviously, we want this Delta to be healthy and thriving and moving in the right direction, which is toward more restoration through our lifetime and beyond.
So, Restore the Delta has really formed to work on water quality and quantity issues. So the water quality plan updates are really important to us, and those are topics that we will continue pursuing. One thing that we're really interested in is also, as an organization, reconnecting people who live in the 5 Delta counties with the Delta as an asset.
Yes.
As a place that is really their environmental center, learning to care and protect their watershed, and embracing all that it has to offer, its culture and its history. Very interesting stories we learned when we were pulling together water board testimony is that people who are 3rd generation, 4th generation in San Joaquin County have no idea that their families came here because their families worked either in building the Delta or in agricultural jobs. So there's been a real disconnect.
Yes.
Between people who live here taking pride in that region and what their family built.
Right.
So we're interested in really stepping up our, I want to say, educational, cultural advocacy, so that people really start identifying with the Delta as something worthy of protection.
Yes.
So we're going to be looking at creating and doing more events that foster that. And we have ideas that we want to roll out during 2018 about how to turn that into tangible physical assets that really benefit, starting in San Joaquin County, but then the entire Delta region.
Yes, that's wonderful. I think the strategy is great, and that's what Delta Flows has been doing. I don't know, this might be, what is it, the sixth
I think so.
sixth program, and been focusing on the value of the Delta and its importance in our community. But I do, in the community, we appreciate you taking the time last episode and this episode to really focus on the Restore the Delta project and the fact that this is we are making progress, but it's by no means over.
No.
And we still have an uphill battle.
That's right.
Yet ahead. Of course, now I've been the guest interviewer.
Right.
But this show is hosted by the interviewee, Miss Barbara Barrigan-Parrilla, and we want to thank you for talking with us.
Thank you. Next week, I know we're going to have Philip Merlot on, who is a local historian who's really been focusing on the connections between Delta and Delta water policy and history of various cultural groups, specifically in Stockton.
All right, so tune in next week for Delta Flows right here on KXVS, the voice of Stockton. And of course, thanks everybody to those who came out to support the event, and also those who've been supporting Restore the Delta. This is our community, this is our legacy, this is our heritage, and it's something that really we have to preserve and improve as time goes on. And this thing is going to outlast all of us. So let's be responsible stewards and restore the Delta.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbara. And please tune in and stick around for more. And we invite you to go to Facebook and YouTube and watch the previous episodes of Delta Flows right here on KXVS, the voice of Stockton, KXVS.org.